This is Gridiron Graduates, a weekly podcast covering all things football. Episode number 30. Forget it, Jake. Recorded January 13th, 2016.
Hey everybody, football fans and the like, how you guys doing? It's Bill Rossetti. Another edition of the Gridiron Graduates coming at you. Thanks, as always, for checking us out. I, of course, as always, joined by my good buddy, Mr. Ian Wharton. Ian, what's going on, man? How was your week?
Hey, it's good, man. It's good. I'm doing some in-depth player profiles at Bleacher Report this week, which are always fun. Looked at a couple guys, Ezekiel Elliott, looking at Miles Jack tonight, and also yesterday I did Marcus Peters. So things are good, you know. Some big-time head coaching hires, which are a lot of fun to speculate about too. So things are good, man.
Good. Yeah, definitely a lot of stuff I want to touch on this week. It certainly was a busy week in the NFL, so let's get right to it. I think the first thing I want to talk about is the big news out of Houston this week from the owners' meetings. The St. Louis Rams are officially history. They are back to being the Los Angeles Rams. The NFL approved the move by a vote of 30-2 last night. Curious who the two that voted no. But the Rams are back in Los Angeles, and they also voted to give the Chargers the option to move to Los Angeles with them. And there was talk today that there's potential that they may make the move for this season. There was a report that said that there's framework on a potential deal that would, like a possible shared stadium or something like that between the Rams and Chargers. And it's possible that the Chargers accept that. They said they did have until March to decide whether they'll play in LA or San Diego this season. And then they have a year to actually decide if they're going to move to Los Angeles. If not, then the Raiders have the option to move to Los Angeles. And you have to think if the Chargers don't exercise their option to move to Los Angeles, I think the Raiders are going to absolutely jump all over that, because it's pretty clear that Mark Davis wants out of Oakland. He even talked in the press conference after the meeting saying something like this was not a win for the Raiders or something like that. So it's pretty clear he's not happy. He wants out. They'll probably look at cities like San Antonio or something like that. But that's going to take some getting used to now to go back to the Los Angeles Rams. I mean, you know, and all the time I've watched football, it's always been the St. Louis Rams. You know, I was just a little kid and didn't even watch football when the Rams first moved to St. Louis. But now they're back in Los Angeles. And I'm really excited. You know, obviously it's a few years away, but I'll be interested to see what that stadium looks like when it's finally built. It's supposed to be, you know, this massive, lucrative stadium that's going to host all these big events, you know, both NFL and non-NFL. So it could be fun. You know, this may work out. You know, a lot of people worried, oh, football in Los Angeles didn't work out the first time. What makes them think it's going to work out again? The fact that this stadium's supposed to bring in a lot of money is certainly going to help. What was your take on seeing this news last night with the Rams?
I feel bad for St. Louis fans.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. The other big thing is just I mean, I don't really care if it works or not. I hope it works in terms for the franchise. You know, you feel bad for the fans in St. Louis, the workers in St. Louis. I can tell you, I know for a fact that pro sports employees, and not necessarily front office, but more so like on the business side, most of them don't make much money. So, you know, for them to lose their jobs, even if they relocate, I can't imagine that they're going to be receiving a big pay raise, or if they want to uproot their family to St. Louis or from St. Louis. Yeah, it's just unfortunate for them. But other thing is, you know, they're bringing bad teams to LA. And I know that you don't really have a choice because you're taking what's available, but I don't think the two less interesting teams could be going to LA here in 2016, maybe 2017 for the Chargers. But they both have their stars. Obviously, Phillip Rivers is amazing. St. Louis has Aaron Donald and Todd Gurley that they can build off of in the future, and they have some good pieces on defense, especially. But I mean, they're not a fun team to watch. So, you'd almost want them to get someone with a little bit more offensive pizzazz, and especially to keep Jeff Fisher. Oh, that's such a bad decision, but I mean, it's just weird. It's weird to think about. It's honestly, until I see them playing in LA, I'm not really going to believe it.
Yeah, it's like, congrats, Los Angeles. You got a football team. Your head coach is Mr. 8-8 himself, or should I say Mr. 7-9 himself, and your quarterback is Nick Foles. Congratulations. No, I'm sorry. No, your quarterback is Case Keenum.
Yeah,
right.
technically it's Case Keenum. Yeah,
starter. So, yeah, congratulations. Welcome back. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you definitely got a feel for the fans of St. Louis because, I mean, obviously the support was there. They had a great run in St. Louis. Obviously, the Super Bowl title with Kurt Warner, one of the greatest offenses we've ever seen. A lot of Hall of Famers on that team. And you mentioned yourself, a lot of jobs are being lost too, particularly, media writers that cover the Rams and certainly employees of the, in the stadium during games. So this certainly affects a lot of people. And obviously relocation is tough. That's why the NFL always wants teams to do all they can in their home stadiums first before moving. So it's a very tough process. The funny thing about this, though, too, is that the city that did the most to keep their team loses their team, and the city that did the least to keep their team keeps their team, at least for the time being. Really weird how that works out, but, money talks, obviously, and that's the whole point of this move to Los Angeles with the Rams, with the big stadium that's to be expected from them. So, yeah, it'll be interesting now next season when we talk the Los Angeles Rams and potentially the Los Angeles Chargers. So, should be fun there. Yeah, let's move on. You kind of mentioned it at the top of the show. Yeah, a lot of coaching moves to talk about. So let's jump into those, shall we?
Sure.
Literally, obviously we talked a couple coaching moves last week, and then literally maybe an hour after we stopped recording last week, the news broke that Lovie Smith was fired by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which to me was shocking. I mean, or at least very surprising, because obviously they're coming off a 6-10 season, and not the greatest season, but you could tell the improvement was there. Going from 2 wins to 6. And they had some bumps on the road. Obviously, they lost some games they probably should have won, but you expect that with a young team like Tampa Bay with a young quarterback like Jameis Winston. But the improvement was certainly showing there with Winston playing better as the season wore on. Doug Martin, after being left for dead the last couple seasons, finally had a great season, second in rushing. But then, of course, they had some injuries they had to deal with on offense. Vincent Jackson was banged up. Mike Evans didn't play as well as he did his rookie season. So there were still some issues, but I still think there was improvement. They were showing improvement, and it feels like he got another raw deal like he did in Chicago, getting fired after a 10-6 season. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, it's really weird that the two coaches that had just drafted and were coaching, Marcus Mariota and Jameis Winston, as rookies, were fired. And obviously we've known about Ken Wisenhunt being let go for a long time. But Lovie Smith, I mean, I get it. I get Lovie Smith being fired. I don't think he was a good coach anymore. I know some people like to point to, what he did in Chicago, and that's fine. But you could also argue that he was part of the reason why that team never reached the Super Bowl outside of that one trip. And when they got there, obviously they lost. And he was part of the. He can be part of the answer, but he can also be a big issue because he couldn't put together a good defense in Tampa Bay, and he had personnel say. And when you handpick talent over the course of 2 years for your defense, and your defense is a bottom 3, bottom 4 unit, that's a huge issue. I mean, I understand it, and I don't think that you should waste time with a coach. I agree that patience is needed. I agree that continuity is needed. I absolutely agree with that. But if if 2 years in, you look at your coaching situation and just say, this is just not going to work. It's just not worth it for us to continue down this path any more time. I respect the ability to cut the cord. And it's a very fine line. And it may even sound contradicting at times. But it's same for Cleveland with Mike Pettine. Mike Pettine was a high school coach. I mean, this guy was outcoached on a weekly basis. He even just did it to himself, where his rotations didn't make sense. He would play a guy 60 snaps one week and then 10 snaps the next week. It's not how you develop young talent. He had to go too. Even though Cleveland could have used that continuity, he had to go. And I think the same thing for Tampa Bay. They're promoting Dirk Cutter, it seems, to head coach, which isn't official, but it just kind of seems like where that's going. And, Dirk Cutter deserves a chance, I think, at head coach. I like that move. They're kind of staying within the same realm of what they already had, obviously. They'll probably keep I don't know if they're going to keep their defensive coordinator, but I would almost think that they will. Maybe they just needed a change at the top. I don't know. But obviously not changing the offense is a huge plus for Jameis Winston. You don't want to change the offense because he's a good fit with Dirk Cutter. But I'm surprised, but I'm not shocked. And I'm actually proud of the franchise for doing it because, again, if don't waste your time.
And I know a lot of the Buccaneers players were certainly very surprised. There was a lot of players tweeting, especially guys like Levante David, excuse me, who were, I forget which player it was, saying something like, 3 coaches in 5 years. But and we talked about this before, how a lot of these owners are starting to become kind of impatient and just want to try to find the right guy and get things going as quick as possible. So, and you mentioned Cutter. Looks like he's going to be the guy, which I think is a good move. Like you said, Winston's a good fit with Cutter, so it'll be fun to watch. If that's the move. Again, it's not official yet, but all signs are kind of pointing to Cutter being the guy. It seems like that's who they're zeroing in on. And then, of course, elsewhere, in the last couple of days, 3 head coaching spots have been filled. Actually, 2 just today. 1 over the weekend, and we'll start with the one on Saturday. And, of course, it's the team you're closest to covering, the Miami Dolphins, getting who I personally thought was the best coaching candidate on the market, and I'm sure a lot of people did too, Adam Gase, hired by the Dolphins. I'm excited by the move because, we've seen how Gase has worked with quarterbacks. He, in just one season with Chicago, kind of turning Jay Cutler around, he proved that he was more than just Peyton Manning's right-hand man in Denver. So I'm really excited to see what he can do for Ryan Tannehill. But you're the Dolphins guy, so I'll defer this question to you to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, same with most first-time head coaches. I'm cautiously optimistic, just based off of his resume. Like, he has a strong resume. He's been coaching since he was 18 years old. Especially since he was a grad assistant. But he didn't play football, so that gave him a couple extra years to coach and to gain experience in that field. And I'm certainly not one of the types that believes that you have to play to coach or play to evaluate. I think that's really dumb. It gives you a different perspective for sure, but it doesn't make you better at anything. It just gives you that exposure. But no, I like the hire. I think what he's done what he did in Chicago, especially what he did in Denver, what he did in Chicago was actually very impressive because he was working with spare parts. The offensive line was in tatters when he got there. Jay Cutler legitimately could have been cut. If his contract would have allowed him to be cut, Chicago probably would have just released him. But they couldn't without the cap penalties. And the running back situation, Matt Forte got hurt. They drafted Jeremy Langford. Obviously, Forte is a good back, and obviously Langford's a good back. And he got great production out of those two. He ran a pretty balanced offense. It was almost close to 50-50. I think it ended up being around like 55-45, which in today's NFL is balanced. And that's a really good thing. That's a great thing, especially going to Miami where it was not balanced at all. You're looking at around almost 70% of the time they were throwing the ball, which is disgusting. That should never happen unless if you have Tom Brady, and even then, quite frankly, it still shouldn't really happen. And I think what he did with the wide receivers there, a very limited group of wide receivers with Alshon Jeffrey out, and then when you look at what he did with Denver, did a really good job of maximizing their great weapons. So we've seen him with different personnel, we've seen him with different strengths, different rosters, and he's done well with both of those. With one with a limited situation and one with a very wealthy situation as far as offensive talent. So, I think that he's built a decent staff. We'll see about some of the positional coaches, obviously, and the defensive coordinator. We're going to learn a lot. We're going to learn a lot about Gase as well. I don't think you can be sold on a first-time head coach, but I don't think you can really be sold as a retread either, like a second, maybe third-time head coaching candidate. You were fired for a reason, and you're a first-time head coach. I almost would say that you maybe have more optimism for that, but there will be growing pains as well. So it's just kind of realizing that, look, this needs to be given long-term. Miami needs to give Gase 4 to 5 years at least to see what he's got. It's just the franchise needs it. Everyone's on the same page. Now, did he have the strongest resume? I don't think so. I think Hugh Jackson and Mike Shanahan were two guys I probably preferred as far as resume, just strictly as far as what they do on the field. But overall, I think he fits in better with the Dolphins franchise, and that matters too, because the Dolphins have had a lot of dysfunction in their front office and coaching staff the last couple of years, really to levels where that hasn't really been reported. But it's been very, very toxic situation in their front office, and I think that Gase, along with Tannenbaum and Chris Greer, the new GM, I think those guys are going to work together well.
And your boy Hugh Jackson just got hired today as head coach of the Cleveland Browns. Another good move, I think. I'm really excited to see Jackson get a second shot as a head coach. I thought he got a raw deal when he was with Oakland. I mean, he took what was kind of a below-average team, got them to 8-8, which was, I think, at the time their first non-losing season. I forget if it was that year or the year Tom Cable was there before. I could be wrong on saying it was their first non-losing season since the Super Bowl. I think maybe Cable was there before. But Jackson got them to 8-8, and I thought he did a good job. But of course, the Davis family is very infamous. So they gave him the boot after the season, and he, of course, landed on his feet in Cincinnati and built himself back up. And now it'll be interesting to see what he does with the Browns. It's being reported that they're going to move on from Johnny Manziel, which doesn't come as much as a surprise. I think the Browns have kind of seen what they have. Well, of course, it's a brand new staff too, and it seems pretty clear that they've seen what Manziel has, and they're not happy. They just, and you usually see it all the time too with new head coaches, new staffs. They just want to start fresh with new quarterbacks or whatever, and of course they'll hold the second overall pick, so a guy like Jared Goff could be there. But for the Browns to get a guy like Hugh Jackson is really big. And it's, and there's certainly talent on that team. I think Jackson can certainly bring out some of that talent, especially if they get a solid quarterback. And you get Josh Gordon back at wide receiver next year. Gary Barnidge, of course, coming off a breakout season. So, not saying the Browns are going to become world beaters all of a sudden, but at least, they won't be a complete laughingstock in the NFL anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you. I really like this hire, and quite frankly, I'm surprised by it. I'm surprised that they were able to get a candidate this good. Now, I will say, instantly, in Hugh Jackson's press conference, you could see why some owners don't want him. He's kind of like that Rex Ryan type. He is bold. He is aggressive. He is kind of loud. Now, I like that personally. Like I'm the type that I would respond to that quite well as a competitor. But as an owner, a billionaire owner, it's a little bit different. You have a different ego, I'm sure. I'm just guessing. Unless if I win the Powerball tonight, in which case I will have a very nice giveaway for a lot of people. But no, I mean, I think that as far as a head coach with a vision that can implement a strong structure, get the most out of players, I think Hugh Jackson's a good coach, man. I think this is a great hire for Cleveland. I hope it lasts. I really do. I grew up an hour away from Cleveland, and although I'm not a Browns fan, I'm a Browns supporter. I want to see them do well. A lot of my friends are Browns fans, and these people deserve a winner. So we'll see. We'll see. If they end up being on the same page, and I hope that he gets the time that he needs to kind of build his roster the way he needs. And really, though, the biggest thing for me is, like you said, can they get that quarterback? And if they can get that quarterback, man, life is easier. It is a whole lot easier. Mm-hmm. I hope that I think that they could get lucky in the sense of there are varied reports on Jared Goff on where he'll go in the draft. Ben Albright, at Benjamin Albright on Twitter, has great connections within the NFL, and he said that he's heard from people that he doesn't think Goff will go quite nearly as high as what people think on Twitter. So I think that would suggest mid to late first round. And then I've seen Matt Miller from Bleacher Report say that he's not going to lead the top 10. So if the Browns get lucky, they may be able to get Joey Bosa number 2 and then trade back up from the early second round into maybe like the mid to late first round and get Jared Goff. And I think that's really the start of like a great team. Depending on how they handle Goff. As much as I like Goff, I think he needs to sit a year to bulk up and adjust to the NFL. But then year 2, 2017, then you'd really be looking for, the takeover. So, we'll see. I mean, Browns' luck hasn't been that way. Browns' luck would be that the Titans pick Joey Bosa number 1, and then they have to force a quarterback pick at number 2. And by their luck, they would take a non-Jared Goff quarterback, which I would not recommend.
And then the hire that just happened just a little bit ago from the time that we're recording this. We're recording this on Wednesday nights. And this news broke maybe about an hour or so before this. Ben McAdoo has reportedly been hired by the New York Giants. And what was interesting is at the beginning of the day, the talk was that McAdoo was potentially the favorite to land with the Eagles. And the Eagles were apparently, in on him and possibly ready to hire him. Sounds like the Giants quickly made a move and were able to lock up McAdoo. And again, I guess it's kind of early to say, these are bad coaching moves. You want to think positive until it kind of blows up. But with McAdoo, you're coming off 2 straight top 10 seasons, top 10 offensive seasons, with him as offensive coordinator, and you've seen Eli play well. Obviously, a lot of that has had to do with Odell Beckham, but, they've dealt with injuries this season. Victor Cruz was obviously out. They had injuries along the offensive line. The running game wasn't exactly a strong point. And then, of course, you're playing with the defense that was just a mess all over the place. But in keeping McAdoo, you keep Eli in a familiar offense, and it's clear that Eli is pretty happy, has been pretty happy with Ben McAdoo. So you get to keep working with him. You should get Victor Cruz back next season, good to go. Ruben Randall, his play certainly improved last season. So there's potential now to keep this offense growing. Now you got to work on the defense. The nice thing is that Steve Spagnuolo is expected to stay on as defensive coordinator, and he's certainly a great defensive coordinator, as we've seen. So he'll get a chance to keep working with the Giants. And there's reports that Joe Philbin, former Dolphins coach, may land as the offensive coordinator for the Giants. And I know you have talked a little bit about McAdoo. It seems like you're a pretty big fan of him as well, too. So I'm curious your take on him staying, I guess, so to speak, and being promoted with the Giants.
Yeah, so I'm a fan of the hire. Obviously, I like I said this for Case too, I don't know if he'll be a good head coach, but I know that he's a good offensive coordinator. And I think he's done a lot of good things with the Giants. And I like the aspect of continuity. To be honest with you, though, I know that Tom Coughlin had made some really bad decisions last year. I know that he struggled in critical junctures. And he may be even just too old at this point. And I wouldn't hire him if I was a different franchise. But if this coaching search, if they would have known how it would have went, where they didn't even get an interview with Hugh Jackson, they couldn't really get an interview or any consideration from guys like Sean Payton, who was rumored to maybe be interested, Nick Saban, one of these big stalwarts, and they ended up with their offensive coordinator. I just think that that's a disappointing result. I think maybe you should have stuck with Coughlin for, until Eli was ready to step away in a year or two, maybe 3 years, or just wait until the right candidate is available and then move on at that point, because it's just a little strange to me why you would move to the mentee as opposed to the mentor. At this point, it didn't feel like that's what the plan was. And if that wasn't the plan, then quite frankly, I think maybe they may have botched it.
So that leaves, right now we still have 4 teams looking for a head coach. I think we both expect now that Dirk Cutter will probably end up as head coach of the Buccaneers. And then you still have Philadelphia looking for a head coach. You've got Tennessee, and you've got San Francisco. My guess with Philadelphia right now is that it's going to be Doug Peterson, because, other than McAdoo, it started to feel like those were going to be the top 2 guys, Peterson and McAdoo, and obviously McAdoo's gone. And, if they were going to hire a guy like, say, Pat Shurmur, they probably would have done it by now. I think they're probably waiting for, certain team to end their playoff run, i.e. the Chiefs. So I feel, maybe they're just biding their time for Doug Peterson. And then with Tennessee and San Francisco, no idea which way they were going to go. For a while, it felt like Tennessee was doing nothing, and maybe they were just going to stick with Mike Mularkey, which would have been blah. That would have been one of the most unexciting hires of this offseason. But at least now they're interviewing other candidates. I know they're expected to talk to Terrell Austin. I think Doug Marone's name is still kind of floating out there. And then San Francisco, there's talk that Mike Shanahan could be one of the favorites to land there, which would be quite interesting. You kind of alluded to Shanahan earlier in the show, so it should be interesting to see what direction these last couple teams go as far as who they hire as their head coach.
Yeah, definitely. It's really interesting. I think the team to really watch are the Eagles and the 49ers, just because I feel like those teams have missed so often now in their search, where it's like, oh man, like, yikes.
Yeah, and the best part is, of course, is that Philly supposedly got a head start on everyone because they fired Chip Kelly even before week 17. And now they're just, unless they're really set on a guy like Doug Peterson, it almost feels like they're sitting back and just kind of watching some of these big names go off the board. Because they did interview Adam Gase. Obviously, he's off the board. Never really reached out to Hugh Jackson. They might have jumped in late, but when it comes to the coaching carousel with these top names, if you're late to the game, you might as well not even try, because you're, like the Giants, they became interested in Hugh Jackson. They just unfortunately became interested too late, and the Browns stepped in and swooped them up. So it's like I don't know. It's we'll see what they do. Maybe it won't be a splashy hire at this point, but then again, neither was Andy Reid. So we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, you never know. You never know until guys get in. Bruce Arians was the last coach hired a couple years ago when he was brought in. And, we know how that turned out. So you just never know with these guys.
Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of stuff that's happened off the field. I think let's move on to stuff that actually happened on the field over the weekend, as the NFL playoffs got underway last week with the wild card round, and boy, was it an interesting weekend. Well, for one thing, of course, history was made, and that for the first time ever, all 4 road teams won on a playoff weekend: Kansas City, Pittsburgh, Seattle, and Green Bay. So let's kind of go through some of the games and kind of in turn preview some of the divisional round games as well. We'll start with Kansas City, Houston, and this game was just ugly from the beginning. I mean, it was close for a while, but it never really felt like Houston was ever in it. It just seemed like too much of a mismatch from the get-go. The Chiefs' defense just played extremely well. And, of course, it also helped that Brian Hoyer was absolutely terrible. It was just an ugly game, and that's the way I expected it to be, because the Chiefs are coming in so hot. The Texans were coming in as the best team of the worst division in the NFL this season, and now we come to find out that J.J. Watt was playing with an injury and just underwent surgery. So Chiefs are rolling. Now they go into New England to face the Patriots, which should be a very interesting game, because, of course, the Patriots, it seems like they're getting a lot of people back. Edelman is expected back. Danny Amendola is probably going to play. But they still have issues along the offensive line, so if that Chiefs defense can get to Brady, I think the Chiefs definitely still have a good chance to defeat the Patriots, even without Jeremy Maclin. I know, we have to bring that up too, the Jeremy Maclin injury. Luckily, it's only a high ankle sprain. They found that. At first, especially when you saw the look in his eyes, it could have been a lot worse. Thankfully, it's not. It's just the ankle sprain, but certainly his status is up in the air for Saturday afternoon. But overall, what did you take away from the Texans game, and then looking ahead to New England for the Chiefs?
Yeah, so I mean, the Texans were clearly who we thought they were. We knew, and it's kind of funny. We knew that the AFC South was a bad division all year long. We knew that the NFC East was a bad division all year long, and so it's kind of funny to see how those games played out. Obviously, for the Texans, hey, congrats on a great year. You guys got to the playoffs. That's not something that we expected. Maybe 6 weeks into the season after getting steamrolled by the Dolphins, who had just fired their coach 2 weeks prior. So they made a great stride down the season, especially defensively, as a team, and they have a lot to build off of. If that team finds a quarterback and can figure out what to do at running back without Arian Foster, then all of a sudden, hey, that's a good team. And it might not be right away, especially to find the quarterback. That's certainly not an easy task, but Bill O'Brien saved his job, for one. If there were any doubts of him getting fired, those are gone. And which I don't think would have been fair anyways, especially after just 2 years. I think he's done a nice job there with a really limited talent offense. So congrats to them. They just didn't have a chance. So Kansas City wise, this team's good, man. This team's really good, and their defense is amazing. And I charted Marcus Peters 8 games of his, the 8 hardest games that he had personally as matchup wise, and he posted a better coverage productivity score than anyone else I charted last year. Now, obviously, I have 8 more games to go, but a lot of those teams are cupcakes without number 1 receivers. So if he can finish out, I mean, we're talking about a dude that would have been better than every other cornerback in 2014. And obviously I have to do the 2015 charts, but that's just incredible. And this is a guy with 8 interceptions, and there are some negatives there. When he gets beat fairly badly. It's not often that he gets beat. It's only, a small handful of times a game, but he's along with some other great playmakers on the defense. Obviously we know about Eric Berry. Sean Smith, an elite cornerback himself. Not to the level that Peters is playing at as far as a playmaker, but he's a great player as well. They have playmakers all over that defense. If it wasn't for Andy Reid coaching this team, I would pick them to win against the Patriots. But I'm a little nervous ever picking Andy Reid against Bill Belichick. Because one guy has obviously an incredible record in the playoffs. One guy has a terrible record in the playoffs, especially with the favored team. So I don't know, man. What do you think about this game? Because I'm stuck 50-50, and if I'm 50-50, I'm not betting on Andy Reid.
Yeah. I feel like I want to go with the Chiefs just because they were my Super Bowl pick before the playoffs started. I mean, obviously, New England.
Then you should be feeling good, especially after that, especially against the Texans.
Yeah,
you should be feeling good about that.
It was only Houston, but still, But the fact is, they beat them.
I mean, it was over 11 seconds in. Yeah, it was over literally off the opening kickoff.
Yeah, it was an expected win over Houston, but at least it wasn't a close win that made you think, oh, well, how did they let them in? They blew them out of the water, and that's what good teams are expected to do. So, I mean, I still feel they can get it done. They could still run the ball well enough. Maybe attack them with Kelsey. It should be a fun matchup. I think this is going to be a really good game. It could definitely go either way. But I mean, I'll stick with Kansas City. I think at this point I'm not going to back off the Chiefs pick.
No, I like that.
Even with the Macklin injury. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with Kansas City. I have a buddy that's a Patriots fan, and I'm telling him, I think the Chiefs are going to win. And he's like all mad because, the Patriots are getting everyone back and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, buddy, your homerism is shining brightly.
Right.
But, yes, so I'll stick with Kansas City. I will mention, too, like, I try not to bash on media members because, I want to get into this business even more.
Mm-hmm.
But it was kind of interesting seeing on Twitter, I think it was Jeff Howe, who was like, he watched a lot of Chiefs film, and he thinks Julian Edelman is going to roast Marcus Peters. And let's just say some of his mentions weren't exactly the nicest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's wrong in terms of that's the type of player that gives Peters, some issues, but it's a tough comment to make. Julian Edelman's coming off of an injury,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not like he didn't miss that time. It's not like we know exactly what kind of shape he's in.
Right.
It's not like Marcus Peters hasn't had a great year. And quite frankly, those two probably won't match up often. If the Patriots have their way, they're going to be putting Edelman on Sean Smith, who's much stiffer. He's much bigger. It's a much better matchup as far as getting space, creating space for Edelman to work. Peters is not really the guy that you really want him up against. Not saying that he won't win against Peters, because I'm sure he will, because Edelman is incredibly good. But I saw that comment as well, and I was just like, I just don't. I don't disagree with him really, but I don't agree with him either. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, it's just one of those comments that's just kind of like, this isn't Madden, where those two are going to be, lined up against each other every single snap. Because Peters plays left cornerback exclusively. He very rarely lines up in any other spot. So when they want that matchup, they can have that matchup. It's just like, if you're going to say that you're watching a lot of tape, you kind of have to have more context than that, because, quite frankly, I just think it lacked context.
It seemed like a lot of people were saying that, too, as far as, like, he mostly plays on the outside, so, I guess that means maybe he'd match up against maybe Brandon LaFell.
Yeah.
Or something, so.
Yeah.
But we'll see, that's definitely going to be an interesting matchup to watch, and certainly a good way to kick off divisional weekend.
It should be good though, man. Like, I think these AFC games will be pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was a little worried about last week, and we obviously got a heck of a game. And this is a really nice transition, by the way.
Yeah.
A heck of a game, Cincinnati and Pittsburgh.
Yes.
A little unfortunate how the game got, kind of marred a little bit there at the end by some really dumb decisions by a team known for their dumb decisions. But I feel bad for them, man. I feel bad for these fans. I know a lot of good Bengals fans, and they didn't deserve that. This team didn't deserve that. But here's where we are. Pittsburgh gets the close victory. And now they, like you mentioned, if Roethlisberger can play, which let's just assume that he will.
Yeah.
This is a guy, I love Ben Roethlisberger. Let me tell you this, but my thing with him, and I think it was Chaps, I think it was Uncle Chaps that said this on Twitter. Great point, which is no surprise, by the way. He said he's the type of guy to where he's going to let you know that he's hurt. You may not even know that he's hurt, but he's going to let you know that he's hurt. And he's going to let you know that he's going to play hurt. And he's going to let you know just how hurt he is. And it's so true. He literally announced his injury to a reporter. It's like, that's kind of unheard of. Like, that's not normal. He likes the attention. He likes the drama of it. And look, hey, more power to him, quite frankly. It's what he does well. And that's kind of his thing. And I mean, I'm not going to hate him for it. But let's assume he plays. Let's assume Antonio Bryant plays. Or Antonio Brown. Let's assume that D'Angelo Williams are going to play. I think all those guys will play.
Okay.
This is going to be a really, really intense game. These are two very physical teams. These are teams with talented defenses, but also incredibly talented offense, obviously, for Pittsburgh when healthy, and then obviously Peyton Manning. I mean, is Peyton Manning going to choke again in the playoffs? Or, I mean, what are we going to see from him? Is this the last game we're ever going to see from Peyton Manning? And so there's a lot of storylines in this one, and this might be the hardest game to pick for me of the weekend.
Yeah, and I agree. I want to go back quick to last week's game and just kind of talk about how ugly it got. You know, it's just a shame.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you one person too that is breathing a huge sigh of relief, only because of the fact that no one's talking about how he kind of cost the team the game, and that's Jeremy Hill.
Yeah, that's true.
If he doesn't fumble the ball, none of this happens, because you know the Bengals are riding high. They just score to take the lead, and then they pick off Landry Jones. You think the game's pretty much over at that point, because the Bengals should be able to just run the clock out a bit, kick a field goal, take a 4-point lead. Then you're leaving Pittsburgh with very little time left to drive the field and score a touchdown, and then unfortunately Hill fumbles the ball. Ben comes back in. They drive the field, and then, as you mentioned, the two stupid penalties by the Bengals. I mean, at first it looked like maybe Burfict was leading with a shoulder, but after replay, he was headhunting a bit there, for sure.
Yeah.
And there was no need for the hit, because the ball was already out of play.
Yeah. Already well covered. I mean, it's just opening yourself up to risk when you didn't need to. Mm-hmm. And I mean, this is a guy, he's a dirty player anyway. I mean, that's
why he got undrafted, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, there's no secret there. Just an unfortunate play that really, and then obviously like the Pac-Man Jones thing, where he comes in reckless.
Yeah.
And he really seals the loss for them.
Because if it wasn't for that, I mean, there was the Joey Porter incident too. Like, Joey Porter probably shouldn't have been on the field, but Adam Jones has to keep his cool in that situation with everything that's on the line. I mean, two stupid penalties basically gifted the Steelers 30 yards, and especially in the case of the Pac-Man penalty, instead of now a 50-yard field goal, it's only a 35-yard field goal, and it's like, here you go, here's the game, we had it, we want you to have it, congratulations. Just like, ugh. And then the rant he went on after the game, especially that Instagram video, oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah. Just really dumb. Really dumb. And the crazy part is for him is he's got unrestricted free agency coming up. Mm-hmm. At almost 30 years old, he's hitting the unrestricted free agent market. And this is a guy that quite frankly, he played well last year. And I'm gonna venture to say that he's gonna chart fairly well for me, like he did last year as well. But the fact is like it is so hard to sit there and rely on a player like this that you just don't know. You don't know what he's going to do play to play. And, if you're not reliable, you're just not going to stay around the NFL very long. So he may have cost himself literally millions.
Yeah.
Could have cost himself millions with that boneheaded decision to come into that play just completely fired up for no reason. There's a replay that came out today, and I don't know if you saw this, but there's an angle where you can see Joey Porter basically didn't say anything. Like he might have said like a sentence or two to Perfect, but let's be honest here. He didn't have to retaliate. Gilberry pushed him in the back into the huddle of basically Bengals players that were talking smack to him. It was just all so unnecessary. Everything about it was just dumb, didn't need to happen, and Jones flying in from behind, making contact with the ref, really was just icing on the cake. So just this dumb move, and it may have cost him maybe even his career.
Yeah, so just unfortunate how that game ended. But yeah, moving ahead now to Pittsburgh, Denver. I think we could safely assume Ben's going to play because he's a tough SOB. That's just how he is. But I'm worried if Antonio Brown can't go. Because obviously, like, that's your big playmaker at this point. So if he's not there, like, obviously they'll still have weapons in Martavis Bryant and Marcus Wheaton, but boy, to not have Antonio Brown against that defense, I think would be really tough for the Steelers, especially if Ben is limited in any sense. And you saw it on that last drive when Ben came out. He was limited. He couldn't push the ball like he normally does. So, and the Bengals defense is still pretty good, but the Broncos defense was just outstanding this year. So if Ben's limited, and you don't have Brown, and you don't have D'Angelo Williams, I think the Steelers are in trouble on this one. I think Denver advances here. I think it's going to be an all AFC West, AFC Championship between the Broncos and the Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean, that wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I'm going to go... I'm going to have to go Denver as well. I don't want to be honest. I don't. Just because I think that Pittsburgh's offense is sometimes so good. But who knows? There's so many injury questions. You've got the home team. Peyton Manning, I think, just needs to do just enough. Mm-hmm. With that defense, they shouldn't need to put up a ton of points, even if Pittsburgh's fully rolling. It shouldn't be one of those situations where they've got to just continually score touchdowns. So I'm going to go, I'm going to stick with Denver, my original pick, and I'm going to go Denver and Kansas City in the AFC. I know what I said about that being a 50-50 game, but Kansas City's the hot team. I just think they're the better team. I still don't trust Andy Reid, but I'm going to go with the AFC West matchup as well.
Yeah, and then it sounds like I kind of flipped too because I said, Pittsburgh could make a run, and I said I'm not going to switch Kansas City just because of the injury, but it feels like with Pittsburgh though, like the losses that they could potentially suffer are really big. So, that's my reasoning for kind of jumping off Pittsburgh and jumping over to Denver, at least in this game. We'll move over to the NFC now, and another game that had a wild finish. Seattle survives the frigid temperatures of Minnesota thanks to a unfortunate missed field goal by Blair Walsh at the end of the game in what we thought was pretty much going to be an automatic kick. But Walsh missed it. Remember, laces out, kids.
Yep.
And Seattle advances. And it's a shame, too, because Minnesota was controlling this game for a good while. But then Seattle found their mojo a little bit. Got that touchdown. Got a field goal later, and then the defense shut them down. And, as we expected, both defenses came to play. Blame the cold all you want, but these are still two very good defenses that came to play, and the end result was a 10-9 final score. Seattle wins. They advance to, once again, play the Carolina Panthers in the NFC Divisional.
Yeah, I mean, phew, talk about. I mean, the NFC just started that what I had hoped. If a couple quality games, um, Washington and Green Bay, that one ended up kind of getting out of hand toward the end.
Mm-hmm.
But Minnesota, Seattle, man, my goodness. I mean, I got to talk about that one first. I mean, my heart broke at the end there. I mean, this is a competitive game all throughout. Obviously, not high scoring, but it was a good defensive battle and some tough weather. And we saw two good young quarterbacks going at it. We saw the running games kind of struggling for each side. The defense is just owning it, whether it's because it's cold, whether it's because of great coaching, whether it's because just great talent. I don't know. Maybe it's just a mixture of all three. Quite frankly, I would lean that way, especially talent wise. But I thought this was a highly entertaining game. I loved seeing Teddy Bridgewater come back at the end, hit a couple of money throws when he was asked to, and then the heartbreaking missed kick. Obviously, it's like this is one of those franchises that's just tortured. They really are tortured, and I don't know why, but I'm definitely feeling for them, and that was definitely the heartbreaker of the weekend. But Seattle definitely enters next week as a legit threat to Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think Carolina is going to present the same challenges that Minnesota did, and they have an even better quarterback. So, that all being said, they're the defending NFC champions are definitely on upset. Well, not really upset alert, but I mean elimination alert. I'll put it that way. But no, it was an incredible game, and I really wish that, just out of personal rooting interest, not that I have anything to do with either of these teams, but I like fresh faces at this stage in the season. I don't like seeing the same old teams every year. But unfortunately, we're going to see Seattle again, which is, hey, props to them. You need a little bit of luck to win a Super Bowl, and they've definitely gotten their fair share of luck over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, and especially this season, they had the 0-2 start, and people are kind of starting to leave them for dead, and they think they're 2-4 at one point, and they kind of had to dig themselves out of a bit of a hole, but they got hot, and here they are, and I think they could pull the upset of Carolina. I think, I sound like a broken record, but I still feel kind of skeptical on the Panthers as far as can their style of play carry them through the playoffs. Especially when you start facing these good teams. Seattle this week, and if they get past Seattle, either Arizona or Green Bay. I'm just not sure. I mean, they might continue to surprise me, but with Jonathan Stewart still banged up, what's the running game going to look like? Especially in a game like this where everything's going to be magnified. Can Ted Ginn step up and get over his problems with drops? There's still some questions to figure out with the Panthers. And drawing Seattle this week certainly doesn't help. So,
No, I mean, definitely not. No.
But yes, I think Seattle can go into Carolina and pull off the win.
No, I agree with you. I would not be surprised at all. I'm going to go Carolina here personally, but I would not be surprised either way.
And then the last game of Wild Card Weekend saw the Packers defeat the Redskins to complete the sweep for the road teams. Though early on, it looked like Washington was continuing their hot streak, and Green Bay was continuing their cold streak. You started with the safety for Washington, and then it looked like they had a touchdown, but Deshaun Jackson did it again as far as getting a little careless going toward the end zone, and it essentially cost the Redskins 4 points in that series. But then, I don't know what happened to the Packers, but they found their mojo at the right time and just laid it on thick on the Redskins. And like you said earlier, this game got a little bit out of hand for the Redskins. And so it's Green Bay advancing to a return game at Arizona, where they just got throttled about a month ago. So it'll be interesting to see how they bounce back from that. But, if last week's any indication, the Packers are where they want to be as far as, momentum is going. But, they're running into a really good Arizona team who, coming off the week off, and still, in my opinion, the best team in the NFC. I still feel the Cardinals are the favorites in this conference, and and I'm still picking them to win the NFC. I think they beat Green Bay, and I think they could beat whoever comes out of that other matchup, whether it's home against Seattle or if they have to go to Carolina. I think they can go in and beat the Panthers. So, but if the Packers played like they did last week, this could be a fun game to watch. Could be a bit of a shootout. So, should be fun on Saturday night there.
Yeah, I hope this is a more competitive game than their last matchup. I do think it will, because it's harder to win that second time around when you play a team. And obviously, what we saw against Washington was a Green Bay team that looked like the team of the first 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just pray that that's who they stay. Now it's hard because Eddie Lacy's still 3,000 pounds, and Devontae Adams is now hurt and probably out for this game. So, Aaron Rodgers, man, he's not going to have a chance. I don't think. It's too much to stack against the Arizona Cardinals. They can't face a team that's this battered, this bruised, and be at home and be as good as they are. So I think we're going to be looking at a showdown. Personally, I think I'm going to pick a showdown of the number 1 and number 2 seed, Arizona and Carolina. And I don't think it's going to be particularly close, but I think it'll be closer than the last matchup. I'll maybe go with like a 27-14 type matchup.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be a 30-point blowout again for the Cardinals. But
yeah, that seems a little. That's really hard to do. It's borderline impossible to do twice a season, unless if you're talking like divisional powerhouse against bottom seller.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, it's all about timing too with some of these matchups. Like that first meeting, of course, Green Bay was slugging along and Arizona was flying high.
So good.
Yeah. Now you get to this week, Green Bay's coming off an emotional high with the win over Washington. They've got some momentum, but I just think Arizona at this point is too much for the Packers. It'll probably be closer, but I still think Arizona gets past. And like I said, I have Seattle, so I guess I have an all-West Final Four. 2 AFC West and 2 NFC West, so that would be quite interesting.
Yeah, East Coast bias does not like that.
No, they don't.
I'd be pretty happy with that, with those 4 teams. That was set up for a really interesting Super Bowl of either Denver or Kansas City against either Seattle for your bracket, Seattle or Arizona. I mean, we're talking 4 great defenses, which would be a little bit refreshing. So obviously 2 of those teams would make it. And then obviously you're talking about a quarterback who's trying to change his image in Alex Smith, who he's had a bunch of different 2015. I mean, I think he's played pretty well this year. He hasn't been that same Alex Smith that we've seen for the last 5 or 6 years. He's been a little bit more dynamic, making plays on his own. We'll see if he can continue to do so without a fully healthy Jeremy Maclin. Excuse me. And obviously the rest of the quarterbacks are Hall of Fame level.
Mm-hmm.
And even possibly Carson Palmer with the second half of his career, that resurgence going on. He and Cam Newton just playing out of their minds, and I'm really interested just to see basically what comes out of this weekend, because I think this will be a great weekend of football.
Yeah, definitely. it always feels like divisional weekend provides a lot of great football because it's the Elite Eight. Everybody's fired up. It's a chance to get to the Final Four. Even with your picks, we just obviously KC and Denver on one side, and then you'd have Carolina and Arizona, which in a way is, we've seen them, both of those teams in the Super Bowl before, but it would still be kind of refreshing because, these are two franchises we're not used to seeing, amongst the top teams like this.
Yep.
So if those two were to pair up in the NFC title game, then, guarantee that one of these quote unquote lesser franchises would be back in the Super Bowl, which would be fun to see. We could finally see Carson Palmer play in the Super Bowl, or we would see Cam Newton in the Super Bowl, and either way, that would be really fun to watch with the career resurgences that both of these quarterbacks have had. Cam Newton maturing into a strong quarterback, Palmer, of course, coming off the ACL tear and having an MVP type season, and these are essentially your top two MVP candidates. You can make the case Newton's one and Palmer would be two. So, that would be a fun game to watch, and then to see one of those two in the Super Bowl. But yeah, so divisional weekend, always fun. It'll be interesting to see who advances to the NFL's version of the Final Four, which is still bittersweet to say because we know that after this weekend there's only 3 meaningful games left in the NFL season, which is always kind of bittersweet to say.
Yeah, especially because in between the last 2 and the last 1, get that weird week where there's really nothing going on outside of, and I guess isn't the Pro Bowl now played in between the
Yep.
Yeah, I personally don't care at all about the Pro Bowl.
I really don't either.
I honestly haven't watched it in like 4 or 5 years.
Nah, I mean, even with the fantasy football type, I'll watch the draft, but it's like,
yeah,
it's like, oh, which team has the better team? Well, both teams are full of all-stars. That's the whole point.
Yeah, right. And no one's going to play a full game. Like, everyone's playing like a quarter, maybe like a quarter and a half. So it's like no one gets into a rhythm. You can't add meaning to the game, so it's like it's just hard to watch football.
Yeah, it's tough to watch the Pro Bowl, but yes, yeah. So even including today, this weekend, there's only 7 meaningful games left, in the season. So, but we enjoy it while we can, and then after those games, we'll gear up for some fun off-season talk. So
definitely.
I think that was quite a bit. I think we'll save the Alabama-Clemson talk for next week because we'll have a little bit more time, because I think we got a lot in the last hour or so.
Yeah, and also next week we'll be able to talk underclassmen that have declared for the NFL draft. So actually that'll be a good time to recap that game and also talk about some of the underclassmen that may or may not declare for the NFL.
The deadline's coming up for that too, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's the 18th.
Okay, so
I believe.
So it'll pass by the time we meet up again. So sounds good. So there's a little bit of a preview for next week.
Yep.
So any final thoughts?
I don't think so. Just just keep on reading articles, folks, and appreciate all the feedback and everything. This is my favorite time of the year to write because it's more of like a recap, and we have big sample sizes, and I like to try different things, whether they work or not. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they do, but it's fun to try. So
yeah, so as always, thanks guys so much for listening. Thanks as always, of course, to Ian for joining me. Like I said before, really glad that the two of us have been working on this project together. It's been a real fun ride so far. It's crazy to think our first season together is almost over. But yeah, so enjoy the Elite Eight this week, and by the time we talk to you next week, we'll be talking Final Four, and like I said, we'll also touch on the crazy game that was Alabama Clemson. So, and then possibly some more coaching news by next week. So, thanks for listening this week, and we look forward to hitting you guys up next week right here on the Gridiron Graduates. For Ian Ward and I'm Bill Rossetti. Take care, everybody. Thanks so much for listening.